So I thought we'd talk a little bit about portfolios in the classroom and ways we can use them. And we need to think a little bit about what our current understanding is. Um, it begins with understanding assessment, especially if I'm going to talk about an assessment portfolio. And I think we have a decent understanding of pre-year diagnostic assessment, formative and summative assessment at this point in the course. So when we talk about types of portfolios, it becomes helpful to understand that there are multiple types of them. There's the developmental or growth portfolio, and these tend to demonstrate a student's growth over a long period of time, and that period of time can be a year, but it can also be a portfolio that gets passed on year after year after year, and you can see the growth that a student has. Then there are assessment portfolios, and since this is a course on assessment, that's the type that we're perhaps most interested in. They demonstrate students' competence and skills as they grow within a course. They have to have really good standards and learning objectives or benchmarks so that you're definitely measuring progress against a goal that's well known. And it does involve a lot of formative assessment and a lot of feedback as students progress and try to demonstrate that they have mastery of something. And there are showcase portfolios. These are the types of portfolios, a lot of times we think about them as art portfolios. Or we think about them as, here's a graduation portfolio and it shows my leadership, my character, and my athletic endeavors, and something I might turn into college counseling or college at some point to show what I'm capable of doing. Many portfolios you'll find are actually hybrid portfolios. They use multiple aspects. An assessment portfolio might have granular permissions on pages and actually serve as also a showcase portfolio by once the assessments are final and you're proud of them. You can't do those anymore, so it's kind of a hybrid scenario. Okay, this is just a quote from Helen Barrett, who's kind of a premier expert on portfolios in general. So why portfolios? Well, I'm not going to read these to you. I'll let you read them to yourself, and this is posted so you can come back to it lately. It does tend to be a good way to highlight learning and to look at the process of learning, and it's also a great way to give feedback. It's also a good way to demonstrate how students are learning and what your program looks like by having the outcomes well documented in a portfolio. We are finding the use of portfolios to also force differentiation a little bit. Students can choose the objects and artifacts that they want to put in their portfolio, and we can also suggest to them that they do this assignment to show they've mastered a certain goal. Give some of our brighter kids maybe things that challenge and stretch them. There are 4 key pillars of lifelong learning. This is some work out of the Australian universities that kind of form a framework for thinking about portfolios. A lifelong learner, you have to be aware of what you need to know or don't know. That you have to also manage it and you have to plan for your learning. And you have to understand how you learn. And one thing about the portfolio is that it should have a reflective piece. And you also have to evaluate your learning. And it's kind of a cycle of going around and figuring out what you know, what you need to know, how you're coming along with certain goals. And that tends to form a backdrop of a successful portfolio. Okay. Okay. Zupa Zaretta did some work on learning portfolios and looks at them as having being composed of 3 basic components: the reflective piece, the documentation piece, and then also collaboration. That collaboration is with peer reviewers or teachers reviewing. There was some more work done by Fink on the role of learning portfolios, which looks at a model of active learning and then an assessment and looks at the overlap and finds that portfolios overlap really well with reflective dialogue and self-assessment. We're not going to talk about that. So a portfolio framework, there's a couple of frameworks we're going to look at, but a very simple one says that the portfolio is basically composed of 4 parts, or there's 4 pieces of this portfolio process. There's collecting the artifacts, there's then selecting them based on standards that say, this artifact definitely shows that I have mastered X, Y, or Z standard. There's reflecting on your learning process, and then it's using that to project or get some direction for future learning. Helen Barrett's work also adds an additional component that says that the portfolio should provide connection to others to help you with your learning. A more elaborate framework gives you more steps and says that you would project purposes and uses, collect your artifacts, select the ones, interject your own personality, and I do like when we do portfolios to let the kids select backgrounds and themes for their portfolios so it does show them. Reflect, inspect, and look at your goals, and then the cycle kind of starts again as you perfect, evaluate, grade, revise, then you connect and conference with others around your portfolio, and at some point the portfolio will culminate with you being respect and pride in the work that you've done. So things to include in a student portfolio. Students would have their basic information there, and again, it depends on the purpose for your portfolio. There should be a table of contents to help navigate. There should be some semblance of learner goals or an articulation of what the portfolio is doing. The curriculum standards and criteria should be there, although they may not necessarily be viewable to the public if the portfolio is put out for others to see. Portfolios typically have rubrics for self-assessment and to be able to gauge how well certain parts of the portfolio are done. Typically they have guidelines to select the type of artifact, so it doesn't just become a catch-all for everything. You have to be careful with some of the Web 2.0 tools, like when we try to do Evernote portfolios, it gets very easy to clip and put all kinds of artifacts in these portfolios. Then they include the artifacts that get selected, instructor feedback, and some type of reflection. So the steps in creating a portfolio, the first one is to define what the goal or pedagogical purpose for the portfolio is. That'll ultimately determine how you set your portfolio up. You determine the audience. Is the audience just my teacher, perhaps a teacher, an advisor, a librarian, or is it a showcase type portfolio and I'm going to be sharing with a much wider body and want it to have a much more aesthetically pleasing appearance? After you've decided your purpose, who your audience is, the tool that you're going to use, then you need to go into an active working portfolio stage where you're collecting artifacts, putting them in, trying to demonstrate that you've mastered certain competencies if it's an assessment portfolio, or that you've got artifacts that you want to show if it's an art portfolio or a showcase portfolio. Once you've got your artifacts in, and this can be a cyclical process, you hit a reflective stage. You should think to yourself and note why you've chosen those pieces, what that demonstrates, and where it puts you on the learning continuum. After the metacognitive stage, that's frequently that you enter a stage of peer review, connection. I'm sharing with other people, I'm getting feedback, and then you may circle back again to back in the active working stage and the reflective stage, and then sharing again until you get it to where you're ready to enter the presentation or the culmination stage. You say, here's the best of my work if it's showcase, or here's proof that I have mastered certain learning goals. There are a number of tools that you can choose. Mahara is an open source one. I find that one's kind of on the decline, a little bit hard to do. Google Sites, as soon as they opened up for page level permissions, became a terrific site for building portfolios. Wikispaces can serve as a backdrop for a portfolio. Blogs have set up individual pages and also have blog posts. Moodle or your LMS, that really should say your LMS can be an excellent source for portfolios. You're using one in Haiku right now. And then there are commercial options. We happen to use Chalk and Wire, which is a very powerful assessment portfolio, but it's really meant to be an assessment portfolio, not really a showcase portfolio. Don't think of these as just options for student portfolios. You can have a very healthy faculty portfolio that showcases things that you're learning, professional development, excellent lessons, and can serve as an ongoing life resume